good.
Okay, sir. I'd like to start by asking you to tell me your full name, please.
Yeah, my name is Stuart Bruce Gordon, but I got this nickname of Boot, B-O-O-T, during the war.
And when and where were you born, sir?
Born in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1924. A snowstorm. Excuse me. Maybe that's why I like to ski, because I was born in a snow blizzard. In fact, the doctor had to walk to the hospital. You know.
Really? And could you tell me a bit about growing up during the 1920s and 30s?
Yeah, it was during the Depression,
Right.
and
Is it good?
excuse me,
That's good.
you can cut that out. How these coffees out.
Oh, yeah, I'll cut the coffee.
Is it paused right now?
No, like it's still recording, but I can edit it out.
I think that's.
In the 30s in Minnesota, there was very little work for people, and so therefore we grew up without any money. And if you had maybe 2 pennies, you were really thrilled, because you could go to the store and get candy. You get 6 little caramels, 6 caramels for a penny. Wow. And you could get a jawbreaker that'll last you all day, and then for a penny, and bubble gum for 1 penny, and a big long stick of licorice for a penny. Everything was really cheap. Anyway, you really appreciate everything you have. I remember one day at the end of school, and it was the end of 5th grade, so I was 5 and 12. I was
11?
Yeah, 5 and 6 and 11 years old. Anyway, and this kid was kind of wealthy, and he was going to go to private school the next year. So he invited us over to his Lawson's, which is a little store across from the school, elementary school. And he hauled out a $5 bill. And we had never seen one. I mean, we never even had one. And here he and he bought us all, he just gave us each a dime. And we could get 1 pop, which cost a nickel, and then we had 5 cents worth of candy. And he gave it, by the way, it wasn't a $5 bill, it was a $1 bill. And that was amazing that a kid would have a dollar bill. That was, I'd never seen that before. And so this is, so the kid gave you a little bit of what was like in those days, how you appreciate everything. And you'd be, yeah.
And did you have any siblings?
Do you have any what?
Any siblings?
Brothers?
Brothers or sisters? Did you have any?
Brothers and sisters. Yeah. Excuse me a second. I had an older brother who was 4 years older, and he had a bunch of good guys that he ran around with. So I ran around with them. So it was really fun to be, and they accepted me, and I could throw a football almost as good as my brother, and so I went and learned to ski, and I learned to play hockey, and I learned to play softball and camping. So the Boy Scouts. So I joined the Boy Scouts when I was 12, and in those days it was really something. It was really a great organization, and all the really neat kids, neat boys that were joined, and they became kind of part of the scout movement. And so you looked up to them and admired them, and so everything of the Boy Scout. I still remember, trustworthy, reliable, help, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I still remember all the Scout laws. Okay, so it was a period of really appreciating things, and you learned to take orders because you just did, see. And along came the war, and of course it started in Asia, where the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and then later on, of course, Hitler invaded the Sudetenland, and even before that, the land around Ryan, I think he joined. Anyway, so we saw this war coming on, and we knew we would be in it. But almost, I say, 4/5 of the people in the United States opposed going to war. Only 1/5 saw that we should maybe go in and maybe save England and Russia from the Germans, because otherwise they're going to win, and as soon as they won, they would turn against us and invade South America and arm South America and invade the United States. And so we'd be definitely in the war, and we'd be fighting Germany all by ourselves. So it was probably a very wise idea that we would get into the war earlier until then. So along came Pearl Harbor, see, and overnight we went from everybody not wanting to join the war to anxious. I would say 90%, 98% of Americans were eager to go to war and fight. And so it was a big, and you just volunteered. It was our country is at war, and we had this very good feeling of patriotism for it. Yeah.
May I ask you, what jobs did your parents work during the Great Depression?
Well, I was to say, of course, I graduated when I graduated from high school. I was just 18, and that was in '42. So the war had been on for 6 months, or 3 or 4, 5 months or so.
Right.
And so it was. I worked as a movie theater as an usher, and that's basically. And I had a paper route, and I got up early in the morning and deliver the papers, and then I had a summer job, worked for the railroad, laying track, a very tough job. So and then just before the war, before I entered the army, I hitchhiked out to Idaho and became and worked in the lumber camps in Idaho for the Potlatch Lumber Company. And I started out swinging an axe, and after they'd cut the trees down, then we'd come along and cut the branches off. And then we'd pile these branches so they could burn them, in the wintertime. But so then I got a job being a mechanic, actually changing the oils and greasing the trucks, the logging trucks. And then I graduated from there, and I drove a Caterpillar tractor, and I had maybe a crew of 4 people working for me. Here I'm 18 years old, and I had these men working for me. One was a swamper cutting the path and up to the logs, and then the other man was a rigger who would anyway, so had all these men working for me. I had this big Caterpillar tractor, and they'd hawk these logs, and they'd drag these logs along over to the landing, and so it was really a great job. And Idaho was beautiful, and that was a fun job as a kid to drive this big tractor.
Could you describe the moment when you heard about the Pearl Harbor attack?
Yeah, I was ushering, and that's when we heard about it, and I remember in fact, one of the ushers immediately quit his job and walked right over to the Marines and joined the Marines. That's how it was. People were just boom, they just all quit their jobs and went to volunteered to work because they were going to beat the Japanese, and so it was really a kind of exciting, very exciting time. And we didn't know anything about fighting and how awful it was. And so we were finally called up. I could have gone to an active duty right away, but I was afraid I never got permission from my mother to go. And so I didn't have a father. So anyway, I thought, well, I better not go right in. I better wait Well, she didn't care. She was kind of glad that I was going into war, or kind of proud of me, really. I don't. She wanted to get rid of me. No, we didn't have any fights or anything like that. Good relations. But anyway, so finally I was activated, and we went down to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, and it was there's a camp there, and we thought it'd be warm in Missouri because we were in Minnesota, was 2 states north. See, so we just wore little jackets, golf jackets, over, and we got down there, and it was cold. It was miserable because it was all wet. See, and we all started coughing, and pretty soon we were all coughing up blood. We all had a I shipped out of there at 102. Temperature. They didn't even put me in the hospital at 102. I shipped out, and so it was, but it was awful. And we didn't have any uniforms. They weren't ready for us. We had no bedding. We had to sleep on the springs, on these beds, and no blankets. And we were freezing. We did have a stove in the little cabins. So once we were inside, but there's no outside. There's no clothes. And we just. So finally, we heard that the clothes we could go and get some wool socks and some wool underwear and some sweaters and wool shirts and pants and jackets and overcoats and hats. And so we went and stood in line for 12 hours. You know what we got? A toothbrush. That's all. We stood in line for a toothbrush. I had my own toothbrush. But that's it gave you example of how no control. It was just a mess. People didn't know how to run things, and so can you imagine standing in line? We were at attention, but standing in line for 12 hours for no reason at all. See, they could have easily told us to come back and call you when we have closed. They didn't do that, and they didn't give a damn. See, and that was the whole thing. The training took 15 months to become a fighter pilot, and it was the toughest thing I've ever been through. It was just awful because they was always trying to put pressure on you so you could crack, see, and so therefore you wouldn't fly, and so it was really tough training. And we all said, "Give us $1 million, I'd never do this again. I would never become a pilot again." It was just that tough. And I had 3 or 4 close friends that we called one clanky. Well, they were insane. See, they went insane for the pressure. It was that was how tough it was. There was not one word of encouragement or love, except one black guy down in San Antonio. He was dipping out food. And he was saying, there, guys, hi, are you having a good time? He was the only one all the time that was even encouraging or gave us something, to laugh at and nice to us. It was just miserable. And I remember, and then of course we started losing. They needed all these gunners for all these bombers. They needed something like 5 gunners. So one day you were going to be an officer with wings and a second lieutenant. And the next moment you're going to be a gunner. Nothing but private on a gunner. See, and so it was really discouraging to be washed out. And but usually most of them said, "Thank God, I don't have to work anymore. I don't have to sweat anymore." So finally, we kept losing people. I remember in basic flying training, in primary climbing, after we were classified as a bombardier or a navigator or pilot or enlisted man, and then we went from there to different bases. And we went to, of course, flying school to learn how to fly, and so that I had to bail out, and I had this one airplane I couldn't bring it out of a spin, and so what happened was that I finally got out of this airplane, And I waited till it spun by me, so when I pulled the parachute, it would, get stuck in the airplane. And so I waited till it spun by me, and I pulled the parachute, the handle, it was in your harness. It was called a D-ring, and you pulled the D-ring, and of course the parachute popped out, and then the little parachute pulled the big parachute out. Anyway, nothing happened, see? So I'm falling, and finally you're going 130 miles an hour free fall. So that's 60 miles an hour is a mile a minute. So 130 is about 2 miles a minute, see? So you're going pretty fast. Well, the parachute opened at 500 feet, so that's 1/10 of a mile. So 1/10 of 30 seconds is 3 seconds. So that parachute opened and saved my life just 3 seconds before I flat down and died, see? And so looking back, of course, at that time, it happened so quickly that you didn't think about it. But when I think about it now, it's kind of scary, because 3 seconds, and you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And anyway, so and they put me up for an accident board, and they and so I know what they took me up to test me to see how I could pull the airplane out of a spin. So I went up with my instructor for about an hour and a half, and all we did was spins. And what you do is, when you spin an airplane, you pull the stick back until the airplane quits flying. See? And then when it quits flying, you kick in a rudder, and then the airplane goes into this flat spin. And the way you come out is you kick the opposite rudder, you wait one turn, and then you pop the stick, and it comes out of the spin. See? And it didn't. 3 times it wouldn't come out. That's why I fell off. Anyway, so now they're going to see that I don't know how to fly. So I went with my instructor for an hour and a half, and we'd climb up, and he'd put it in a spin. I'd bring it right out on the nose, see. If I made a mistake, I'd be enlisted, man. Gunner, I'd go. And so for an hour and a half, I've been doing these damn spins. And these are called hammerhead spins. See, if you take an airplane up like this, it's heavy in the front of the airplane, and it swings down. We call it hammerhead, and then we go into a spin. Or you put the airplane in a tight bank, and pull the stick back, you go into a snap roll, and then go into a spin. And inverted spins, and any kind of spins you can imagine for an hour and a half, and it had putting out perfectly. I did. So then the next day I had to fly with him. This was a civilian school, see. So his superior had to fly with him, and of course he's a better pilot. He has many more hours, and he put me in these fantastic spin positions, and I brought it right out, see, every time. But it was scary because the night before, worrying about would I bring it out? So it was really. So then the next day, I flew with this head of the ski school, flight school, and he gave me a couple spins, and it wasn't maybe half an hour. That's all we did, maybe 5 or 6. But by this time, I may be the best spinner in the world. No one has ever spun this many times, see. By the way, it used to be a requirement to learn how to fly. You had to learn how to spin, bring it out. But they don't require it anymore because they kept losing people on it. So they don't do it anymore. But anyway, so finally the next year I had to fly with this first lieutenant, a real Army guy, see. And I could tell he was nervous. Because, sometimes it didn't come out and you die, see. Anyway, so I could tell he was nervous. But by this time, I'm confident, see. I'm the spinner of the world. And I jumped, and we went up there, and we put in a spin and bring it right out, and he said, let's go home. We just won. And so they couldn't wash me out for not knowing how to fly, see. And so then they put me up before this accident board. It was like a courts martial. Here you're all you cadet there, and you're standing attention, and you salute, and you, Stuart P. Gordon, 1714-2688 is my serial number, and reporting for duty, and they told you what happened, how the airplane crashed down and was destroyed, and blah 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 blah, and why did you let that happen? I explained that I tried 3 times, and each time it wouldn't work, and finally I just decided I better get out of it. I didn't tell them about this little voice because, I figured they wouldn't understand. They'd watch me out for being crazy, for hearing a voice talk. But anyway, so we, I said I would do it again. And so, okay, so I passed. And so from then I had no trouble flying from then on. So,
Could you tell me why you joined up into the Army Air Corps in the first place?
Most guys dreamed of being a pilot and flying, and I didn't. I used to make wooden airplanes, but I never dreamed about flying and how I wanted to fly. I think mainly I wanted to so I could become an officer. See, I didn't want to be an enlisted man. I wanted to be an officer, and if you kept your wings, you would. So that's the reason I joined, and it wasn't because I wanted to fly, but after it gets into your blood after a while, after a few thousand hours flying. So,
could you tell me about your first solo flight?
yeah, it was. Everybody else solos for 8 or 9 hours. Took me something like 12. And I think the reason is that I had 3 concussions when I was a kid. I was hit by a car, and I fell off a fence, and I fell off a garage onto cement. And I was back on a bag swing. I fell about 30 feet. And so, for some reason or other, I can't remember anything that I hear. That doesn't record. I can't remember. I have to write it down or see it. And so I can go to a movie and the hero's name is John, and I walk out and I can't remember his name. So I think that's what interfered with either I have to really understand how to do something, or I have to feel it. And it's not that I can remember what they said. So I think maybe that was the reason I have. See, I'm an artist. I can draw fairly well in sculpture, and of course that's one part of your brain. See, that's your right part. Yeah, your right part of your brain. Then your left side is your logical or magical or your masculine part of your brain, and that's the logical part. So these 2 parts can kind of interfere, and so it took me that long to solo, but then from then on I didn't have any problems after the spin thing.
After the initial basic training, where were you sent to?
Well, I went to first basic training, Army boot training. That was in Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. Then we went from there to a college, and with something like 5,000 cadets, and in Michigan State University. And we had to march along. We couldn't look at the girls. If we moved our eyeballs, we would get bawled out and screamed at, or make you. They would call, give you a gig, and they gig you, and you had to walk on your own time with a gun, marching around the block at a very fast cadence. Boom, 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 boom. Much faster. It was a penalty for making mistakes. Yeah. Anyway, so it was not very much fun, and then we went to basic primary training, Section, Missouri, basic training in Winfield, Kansas, and then Eagle Pass, Texas for final training, and they kept washing them out. See, even up until the last day. The one kid in my little training flight was from Minneapolis, and they washed him out on the last day. Can you imagine? He had his uniform, and he had his number, his officer's number, and so it was very very, very tough. And finally we graduated. And then we went from there. 25 of us went to the West Coast Command because I had seen a P-39. There's a picture of a P-39 there on the left. This one here, really cute up there, a really cute little airplane, see, and a 34-foot wingspan, but we call it the Widowmaker because it was so deadly. The reason it was deadly was at any airspeed, if you pull the stick back too quickly, it would go into a stall. And if you didn't pop the stick right away, it would go into a spin. If you'd get out of the spin with two turns, you're dead because you wouldn't be able to get out. So these guys, we really worried about that. And also, it was a very small cockpit, so that my head, I had to fly like this, about this high, so I couldn't see. I'm tall from the waist up, and this cockpit was not much room after you were sitting on your parachute. Anyway, so we got to California and we flew those things for maybe 10 hours, and it was not much fun. And then when we lost, 9 boys died in 9 days flying that thing, and those are pilots that had been through training, see, of maybe 300 hours of training, so they were pretty good pilots, and they died in 9 days. So then we went from Victorville, California, to Arapahoe Depot, and then from there we went to Ephrata, Washington, and we got some more training in a P-39. We lost 30 boys in 30 days. It was really, we were all getting kind of clanky, kind of worried, and the commanding officer kept, threatening us that we're going to become washed out and you take your wings away from you, and all these threats to keep us from. Finally, they got rid of him, and I got the most beautiful, the most amazing talk, survival talk, or inspirational talk from this new commanding officer, and I could still remember the room, all the second lieutenants sitting in the whole room, and then the instructors were lined up there with all their uniform with their medals, and they'd all been in combat, some in China and some in North Africa, and some fought in England and the whole. And anyway, and they were our instructors. They had been in combat. We really admire these guys. They're like our big brothers. We just idolize them because they'd been in combat. See, and it was, and they wouldn't let us salute them. See, we were just like big brothers, but we didn't need to because we idolized them so much. See, anyway, so the commanding officer got up there in front, and he didn't talk very long. He was real quiet. He said, "Well, my name is so-and-so. I'm your new commanding officer." And he didn't say anything. And we were quiet, and they're all standing there. And the instructor's up there in front. And he said, "I hear you've been having some accidents. Here you get 30 guys killed in 30 days. Yeah." Anyway, and he said, "It's a lousy airplane. This is a crappy airplane. It's a killer. And it has to, you're keeping the coolants over the beer cans, and it has this high-speed stall, and it has this tumbling. See, the engine was in back of the pilot, and so if it ever tumbled, you'd never get out of it." So that was the spooky thing about that airplane. Anyway, and he said, and then he'd be quiet for a while and look around. And he said, "You know what? You're the best trained pilots that have ever lived. You got all these instructors up here. They've all been in combat and they're teaching you how to fly. You're the best pilot. You're not in combat yet, but when you do, you're going to be the best prepared." And here we are, he gave us a compliment, see, that we were the best pilots. And he said, "There's a war on. If they give us a goddamn beer can, we'll fly it. Do you understand? Yes. We didn't have another accident. It was just no accidents from then on, see, because he'd convinced us that we could do it, see. And so it was really a great speech. And then they gave us P-63s, and that's the picture right there, the four-bladed prop. It was a little bit bigger and more comfortable and a different wing, so it didn't have that ability to have a stall, high-speed stall. And it was so much fun to fly. That was our favorite. And then they gave those to the Russians, and they gave us a P-38. And we looked at this P-38. It has twin engine booms. It's a big airplane. It's a bomber. See, it carries many bombs as the original B-17. And we're supposed to fly, and this is a fighter. You know, fighter pilots would not this damn bomber. But anyway, finally, of course, we had to fly it. And the more we flew it, the more we liked it because it was so comfortable. And it had counter-rotating props, see, which meant there wasn't any torque as you took off. And it could fly. It wouldn't go into a spin. You pull it up, it wouldn't stall. It would just hang on its props. It would drop like this, but it wouldn't fall off, see. It wouldn't hover, but when it was in this position, you could move it. And then you could kick a rudder, and then pull your trigger, and you cut a zero right in half. So it could turn on a dime, see, if you knew what you're doing. So it was an amazing airplane. And of course, because it had two engines, if one went out, you could always come home on the other one. You know? And we had this fun song that went like this. Oh, take me back to 3/8, other P-38. The props that counter rotate, oh my, I'm too young to die. I want to go home, the whole squadron is singing this song. See? You give this P-51 with its bullet-like dome, still can feather up one and come home. So take me back to L.A., where all the war workers play, oh my, I'm too young to die. I want to go home, I want to go home. And it had all these verses, see, and we sang that song, but about the P-38, so we really loved it. It was really a really phenomenal play, and so, yeah.
Well, I'd like to ask next, when were you first deployed to the Pacific?
We took off from San Francisco and went to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii we took off, landed at Johnston Island, a little dinky island in the middle of the Pacific. And then from there we went to Tarawa, which had been, of course, liberated from the Japanese by the Marines, and we saw all those buildings that were riddled with machine gun bullets and things. And then we landed, the next place we're supposed to land was at a place called Biak, and this little island just north of New Guinea. And we were flying along, and the lights were on, it was at night, and pretty soon the lights went out, and this airplane did this maneuver. Never seen a transport plane move. He did a damn near roll. Anyway, what happened was that there was a Japanese bomber got in front of us in the pattern. See all these airplanes trying to land at night and all the lights on. Anyway, this Japanese got in front of us, see? And he dropped all these bombs. Anyway, if we had been in front of him, we would have died, see? And luckily he didn't have a tail gunner there. If they could have shot us down in just a couple of minutes, because we were only 20 feet away or so, 50 feet away. So anyway, we landed, and here all these airplanes were destroyed, these transport planes, and blood and people, and hospital, meat wagons coming up, and we called the ambulances meat wagon, picking up people, taking them to the hospital. It was at night. So that's our introduction to combat. And anyway, so then from there we went to a place called Nadzab, and that's where we were trained. And it was hot in New Guinea. It was, if you get up from a stair and go sit down over there and you're exhausted from your trip, And can you imagine fighting in that particular, oh, that jungle, and it's humid, it was so humid and awful place, you know. Anyway, from there we went up to our different squadrons and went from there to the Philippines, and that's where I joined this 70th Fighter Squadron. And it was a famous squadron because it had shot down Admiral Yamamoto, the Japanese naval officer who planned Pearl Harbor. So, and then the squadron also had made the longest fighter sweep. We went from Zamboanga, which is in Mindanao, southern tip of Mindanao, all the way over to Java and back, and couldn't make it. But we had to call stop at and get refuel a place called Tawi Tawi, a little dinky island that they captured from the Japanese, just east of Borneo. And then we went from there all the way over to Java and then back, and then we refueled and came home. So it was an 11-hour mission, the longest fighter sweep in the war. And then my squadron was the first one to land on Japanese territory after the war. The war had ended, and they wanted to know, apparently, if there were any prisoners left on Formosa. Formosa is now called Taiwan. The Japanese commander beheaded all prisoners. He said they were spies. And I had two close friends. One of my best friends from Iowa, who was the neatest guy you ever known. He was such a good guy. And he was shot down, maybe parachuted out and lived and cut off his head. So anyway, my commanding officer, who had been he hadn't been, see, when you become a fighter pilot, the first thing you do is you become the wingman of the flight leader, and you fly his wing, see, and kind of protect him. And then your next 3 or 4 missions, you come tail end Charlie number 4 man, see, and you fly a few missions as a tail end Charlie. That's the most dangerous. That's where the enemy always shoots down the last guy, see. And then after you did that, you became an element leader. And then once you did that for maybe 30 missions or so, you could become a flight leader, see. And then you'd have maybe 50 more missions as a flight leader. So you're all getting trained, and you're getting to be a pretty good pilot, and you get to be more confident, and then the guys who were the best would stay on as maybe as an operations officer or assistant, and then they became commanding officers. Their fighter policy. Well, here our commanding officer was a bomber pilot, and he had and then have a whole different training, whole idea about discipline and so forth, because they have all these people that are on the plane, see. So the commanding, if you fly a bomber, you had to be the in command of all those men and order them around. But a fighter pilot, you didn't have to do that, see. Nobody flew with you. You're all by yourself. And the crew chief and your armor just idolized you because you were flying their airplane, see. And they just loved their airplane. They did everything they could to make it work. Anyway, so this blackjack used to take his bomber in and bomb the Japanese bases like Rapal truck, and he would bomb us, and he maybe with no fighter covers, no protection. It's all by himself. We call snoopers. And he'd come back from one mission. He was the only one alive on the whole airplane. All the others had dead. So he was really a brave guy, and they gave him this fighter squadron. And I remember the very first he would make us, who are you? Where are your wings and blah blah blah. Why you roll your sleeves down if you're going town with. So we soon found out that he didn't need all that. See, as a fighter pilot, all he had to do was just be a good guy. And so anyway, he landed. he had a wingman who's been in the Merchant Marines, and he's learned a few words of Japanese, and he landed with Blackjack on a place called Taipei. And my wingman and I had this wingman that was really a hot pot pilot, really good from Southern California. He was my wingman, and we circled overhead about 50 feet above the ground at about 90 miles an hour with full flaps and staggered around. And we watched the Japanese come at him out with a samurai sword. Instead of cutting off his head, they gave it to him, see, so we knew he'd be okay. But it was kind of gutsy, see, because how did we, they had shot down one of our airplanes close by there, see, so they hadn't been adhering to the ceasefire, and so it was a little bit of guts, and I was on that mission, so. But I saw that he was going to be safe, so I flew back to Luzon, which is the northernmost base in the Philippines, and Luzon. Anyway, so, yeah.
Thank you. Could you take me back to your first mission and tell me about that? How were you feeling?
Yeah, it was, you're scared, see, because you know that they're going to be shooting at you. You were apprehensive. So once the night before, you look on the bulletin board and they tell who was going to fly and where you were going to go, where the mission was. And then next morning you jumped in this little scramble buggy, which was just a big pickup truck. And then they took you to your airplanes. And no one said anything, no one cracked a joke, no one talked because we were all scared, you know. And so we got in the airplane, and but once you got on the plane and put your Mae West on and your shoulder straps and your seat belt, you felt comfortable because you knew how to fly that thing and you're going to be safe. And so then you really became confident. And I had my crew chief, what they would do is you roll your finger like this. I mean, I'm starting the right engine, so the crew chief would repeat that. So he'd get out of the way of the propeller would. So, and then you start that engine, and it would start going. And then you start the other engine, and he would, and then he'd go like this, and he'd pull these wooden chocks that held the wheels in place. He'd pull these chocks out, and then you could taxi out and take off. And my best friend Doug Hayward from Utah, and he was the character, good pilot. Anyway, what he would do is after got the airplanes, the engines going and the chocks out, and then he'd give the finger to the crew chief, say, "Fuck you, bastards! I'm gonna go die, and you guys have to sit here all by, safe as hell. Fuck you!" See, and they'd laugh, and here they work like slaves, make this airplane, and this kid gives them the finger, So that was kind of the idea of fighter pilot thing. And I thought, well, the funniest things happened. Can I tell you a funny experience?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Just as we're going overseas, we landed at a place called Fairfield, I think, Suisun. It was a little town near Carmel in California. And so we landed there. We were bussed in there into this little air base. And so we went in town. That's another story. But anyway, so we got Doug Hayward and a guy named Joe Crooks and I. We go into this, go see what Carmel is like. And there's another town very close by.
Monterey?
Huh?
Monterey?
Monterey and Carmel. And nothing was going on because the war was on. It was the middle of the week and nothing happened. So I noticed these three guys sitting on the curb. By the way, right close by is Fort Ord, the largest army base in America here. And that's where training base, and that's where we were on the same bus line, our little base. So anyway, I walk up to these three guys. We call them Jeeps. I mean, just new kids in the Army. And I said, hey, you guys know when the bus leaves for Fort Ord? And they all stood up and saluted. See, no, sir. I said, what were you doing with your arm? Well, he was saluting you. Why were you saluting? Well, you're an officer. No, we're not. I'm a pilot. See, we don't have to salute pilots. And you have to drink with us. We can't drink with officers. That's an order. Yes, sir. So in the background, I saw these guys doing this, you know. Get over here. We're going to have a drink with us. You understand? Yes, sir. So we took all these guys. We bought a beer. See, they were teaching them cadet songs. And we were having a hell of a big party. The bus was coming. So we got to get them. So we jumped in the bus. And we, I think they dropped us off before they got to Fort Ord. But anyway, so the next morning we wake up and his major, who's the commanding officer of this Fairfield Ruffle Devil, he is mad. He is furious. And he's a paddle-foot, in other words, he doesn't have his wings, see. And he's a paddle, and he's a little short guy. And he's screaming at us, and we're, why is mad? Well, it turned out that the two-star general of Fort Ord had called this major up in the morning, and he said, keep your goddamn fighter pilots out of town, they're ruining our discipline. So just the three of us got this two-star general upset. But those kids would have followed us to hell and gone, see. They would have gone to done anything for us. So that kind of gave an idea of fighter pilots. They didn't give a shit. They hated the Army, but we loved to fly, and we were good at it, and we were disciplined. And, yeah.
Going back to the Pacific, did you ever provide air support in any of the amphibious landings? On Luzon, maybe? Palawan?
Oh, yeah, we had missions on Luzon. Usually we cover the landings. If we make a new landing someplace, like the Aussies landed at WWII, and that was a big Army Japanese base just north of where we were in Nanjam. And we never, of course, we bypassed Rabaul. But when we landed at, this is a funny story. When we landed at, in the Philippines, we landed first at Leyte, then we wanted to land later on in Luzon and take Manila. And so we landed at a place called Lingayen Gulf, which is just north of Manila. And so we covered that landing and we bombed and so forth and straight. And as soon as we could, we landed there, and we supported that landing, and we operated out of a little island called Morotai, which is just north of New Guinea. And after the mission, well, while we were there, Bob Hope came by with his USO show, see, and I think his singer's name was Frances Langford. Don't quote me, but I think that was her name. Anyway, she was kind of a cute little gal. And after the show was over, they went over to the Officers Club, which was just a tent, see. And so we went to this tent, and Bob Hope was there, anyway. And so they were betting that this one guy in my squadron couldn't take a P-38 and do a loop on takeoff. Take the airplane off and do a loop and then come and land. And so they're betting that he can't do this, or he thinks he can, so he doesn't do it, he dies. So they're making this bet, and the Francis Langford said, if you do that, I'll go out with you afterwards. Okay. So, of course, they finally pour him into the airplane, see, and no parachute, of course, he never gets high enough to use it. And by the way, the runway was pierced planking. It was a metal runway with holes in it, and it was all linked together. And they put that on top of the coral runway, but it slowed you down. See, it wasn't smooth like a tarmac, a tar or concrete. runway. Anyway, but he took it off, did a roll, and then loop. And he landed at sea, and he collected some money and took the girl out. So the next morning, they noticed he's down there next to his airplane. He has, I think, 4 or 5 Japanese airplane flags he shot down, see, but painted these little meatballs next to his cockpit. And he painted a pair of pink panties. So anyway, so we did cover there were 2 major groups of Japanese up near north of Manila at the southern capital called Baguio, and we would drop bombs on them there and support those troops. And then we also supported the troops on Davao Gulf, which was in Mindanao, and that was kind of that was interesting because a friend of mine wasn't in my squadron. He was in the 12th squadron. We had 3 fighter squadrons in my 18th fighter group, the 12th, the 44th, and the 70th. And anyway, this kid in the 12th bailed out on him, and the Japanese grabbed him, and he by this time, then finally he was released and he came back to his squadron. That's why I heard him tell me the story. And he said every morning he'd get up and he'd tell this general, General, he said, your men are dying. They don't have any medical supplies. You're running out of food, and you don't have, you're all surrounded. You're all going to die. Why don't you just surrender? So, but the general was a guy called the Lion of Sumatra. He was a famous Japanese general. He's the one that took Singapore. He's the one that figured out instead of attacking Singapore from the water, he went through this impenetrable jungle. See, the Aussies never had to think that the Japanese could go through this jungle, but they did. And that's how they took Singapore. But only because of this Japanese general was smart enough to realize that they could do that. Anyway, he was in charge of this. So every day this first lieutenant would go tell, hey, General, give up. Yeah, it's all over with. Finally, the general said, okay, you go tell him I'm ready to surrender. So he took his shirt off and he got a flag, and he flagged down and went, and he says, Corporal, the general's ready to surrender. Well, yeah, this corporal runs in, grabs the general, and gets brings him back to Allied lines, and it's over, see? And guess who got in the history book? History book. Neither one of them. The general can't surrender to his second corporal. He has to surrender to his general. So you'll never read about that in the book, see. But anyway, he so that first lieutenant really was the one that caused it, talked the general into surrendering. Otherwise, they would have fight. Then there was a another little detachment of Japanese on the island of Hilo, 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 and it was very close to Zamboanga. And by the way, my girlfriend said, I have a girlfriend back in Minneapolis, and her boyfriend is in the Marines. He's a pilot. He's in Zamboanga. Why don't you go look him up? And I did, which was very smart of me, because he didn't drink. He was a teetotaler, see. Bill Owens was his name. And Bill was a nice guy, but he didn't drink, and it seems that the Marines have an agreement within the U.S. Navy. It goes back to the Revolutionary times that the U.S. Navy have to supply the Marine officers with booze once a week. So I go down and drink Bill's liquor allotment. See, we didn't get any stateside booze. We had to drink this awful crap, the Filipinos made the hangover. So I go down and drink his allotment, and one Friday he said, "Hey, we're having a big mission tomorrow night tomorrow, and it's a joint mission with the Marines and Navy and Air Force, and you're cleared for secret. You can come on. Why don't you join me? Sure, I did. And here was this huge big room, and it's this 2-star admiral in charge of the meeting, and how they had this radar outfit there on this island of Hilo, and the truck supplying this radar outfit with food or supplies, and the Japanese had captured the truck and killed the driver and his assistant. And that's the only, otherwise I didn't know that they were even on an island. But it was just maybe a short, 2 hours away from Zambo, see. And they decided to have this mission, and bomb these guys. So it was all about how important it was to the mission and the first the Navy would go in, and then the Marines, and then the Air Force. We had 3 squadrons. So anyway, I thought, well, how come we didn't hear about this? I mean, here's this big important mission, and we got, and it says on the board, I'm scheduled to fly. That's it. So the next morning I got there and they said, we're going to go to Hilo. Yay! We don't have to carry berry tanks, but we can short mission, we come home right away. And so we were all elated, see. But nothing about why, no big fuss. We'll take off time and so. So we take off, and as soon as we get over Hilo, I noticed there's this B-25 that was painted blue. So I knew it was the admiral was on that airplane observing the whole thing. See? And so what happened was that we were flying along in wide formation, see, and circling the island. And first the Navy went in the airplanes, and then the Marines go in, and then finally we were given permission to go on action. So one of the fighter squadrons, what you do is you never use to push the button on the microphone, which was in your throttle. You never push the button, because then the Japanese could tone in on you, knew that you were there, see. So we never used our radios. It was all quiet. So the flight leader would wobble his wings like that. That means to close it in, make it tight, so his wingman would hear, and the flight leader element leader would fly over, and there'd be 4 of them right together, see. And then he would go up and down like this. That means you get in trail. So then they all get in trail. And then he would take his airplane, do it upside down, and do what we call a split S. Upside down, then straight down, go straight down and drop the bomb, see, and use your machine guns, and then you'd pull off. Then after you'd pull off, we call a rat race, see. He would roll and loop and do chandelles and split S's and all, and everybody follow the leaders. They do this through the clouds, with the holes in the clouds. It was really fun. It was called we rat race. So all these three squadrons, after they dropped their bombs and waiting were rat racing. You see, following each other. It must have been a hell of a show for this admiral. See. So the next Friday I go down and get my liquor allotment from Bill Collins, who's drinking my liquor. And he said, "You hear what happened?" I said, "What happened?" "No, what happened?" He said, "This 2-star admiral was in this B-25 one." That's what I thought. And he observed the whole thing. And he said, the Navy went in, didn't do anything. The Marines went in, didn't do anything. The Army went down with strafing, vertical strafing. And now, see, in a P-38, it has a gondola, and the guns shoot straight ahead, see? Otherwise, the guns are on their wings, and they cross. So, because we saw straight ahead, 1,200 Japanese, not one survived because of this vertical strafing. So these poor little Japanese jumped in little foxholes, and they were okay as long as, but the vertical strafing, they all died. So anyway, but of course we never heard from the Navy. They never told us we did that. This is my friend. So anyway, But after a while, you get clanky. So you get to kind of like the excitement of being shot at. And by the way, 1 hour of combat, you take about 7 hours of tooling around in combat, for exercise of practice to be good. Because when you're trying in combat, you're so eager, you're so on alert, you know when to duck when the bullets come. See, you're just amazing. And I think that's what all people who have been in combat remember, that as they finally were using 100% of themselves. See, and so, you know, yeah. So, any other questions?
Yeah. May I ask, did it ever weigh on your conscience having bombed? Did it ever weigh on your conscience having bombed Japanese and done these strafing missions during the war
Press
or
the
later?
button. Press the button.
Oh, okay.
I don't understand. I can hear him. I just don't understand.
Did it ever weigh on your conscience to have been bombing the Japanese and strafing
Well,
them during the war or until later?
No, well, first of all, we're going in usually at 300 miles an hour, 350 or so. You don't see anybody, see. I never saw a Japanese soldier. Luckily I never had to bomb civilians, see. And I don't think I would have done that. I wouldn't have become a bomber pilot. I couldn't drop my bombs on civilians. But these were Japanese that they would kill you, even if they had one gas left in themselves. And they all, they would commit suicide rather than be surrendered, see. They were really tough. And so we didn't have that, feeling. We hated the Japanese. And but we really didn't hate the people we were fighting, see. And I know, but there were not many surrenders, see.
Mm.
We did see a few in Zamboanga. They had a little prison for them, and we went and saw the Japanese, and they were all very humble, but they were alert, and but we didn't have any hatred towards them at all. And I answered the question, I think.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. I asked, did you have a call sign during the war?
Did I ever what?
Have a call sign or a nickname?
Have a close call.
A nickname.
A nickname?
Hmm?
A nickname? Did you have a nickname? Boot.
Did you have a nickname during the war or a call sign?
Oh, a call sign. Well, every mission was a different call sign.
Okay.
Yeah, so for instance, I remember one was shot put red. Doug Hayward and I, my girlfriend's uncle was a intelligence officer for a Dumbo outfit, Dumbo was a flying boat in the Navy. And so I was going to go see him. So I got permission so Doug Hayward and I jumped in our P-38s and we flew to Samar, which was maybe 3 hours away. It was up near, pretty close to Manila or Luzon. Anyway, so we landed at Samar, and before we landed, we called in a shot put Samar Island. This is shot put red with 2 uncles. In other words, 2 fighters, friendly fighters. And landing instructions. So they said, the wind is from so-and-so, and take runway so-and-so. Roger, do I have permission to make an Army landing? Roger, clearly make an Army landing. Well, now, an Army landing, see, is different from the Navy, see. The Navy landing is here's the runway here. So, and the wind's coming from this direction. Come from that, so you'll have to land into the wind, of course. So the Navy would come down from what we call the 45 to the downwind, come in like this, then they go to the downwind, and then they turn to the base, and then they turn on final and land. And that was the pattern they would make to land. Now, we didn't like the Army. What we'd do is we have, we go into echelon, tight echelon. So these 4 airplanes would stacked like down below. Now our squadron was the 70th, and we didn't do echelons. We went one underneath each other like that. And so we would dive down maybe 50 feet above and we look at the runway to see that it hadn't been bombed while we were flying. And then you'd fly up and you cut your throttle and you'd climb up like this and do a half kind of a big circle. And you put your gear down, that would slow you down. And you put your flaps down, that would slow you down. And then you'd land, boom, 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 boom. See, very quickly. But it was really neat because any time your airplane would quit, you could always land, see? And so, and then I remember when we flew out of Minneapolis during the Korean War, the Air Defense Command, and they had a Navy base there, and I was on the runway ready to take off, and this Navy plane comes in to land on the jet, and he goes in for this downwind, and his engine flipped, and he died right there, see, because he couldn't make it landing. And I think he could have, but he didn't. But anyway, but if he'd had and then when we flew in the States, we didn't go down to 50 feet. We stayed at 1,000 feet. And then we did the circle around like this. But anyway, so landing at Samar, Doug Hayward and I came in. We were doing a little bit hotter than usual. Maybe doing 350 miles an hour instead of maybe 250. See, we would drive down maybe 400 miles an hour. We dive down right close to the boom, and we did this. It looked like a loop from the ground. Say boom, boom, and we landed. Report to base operations. See, so Doug, if you can imagine here, we had these flighters in the back of our heads and cigarettes hanging on, and our guns, 45s on our hips, and anyway, our sleeves were rolled up, and we soldered into this general. Excuse me, he was a bird colonel. See, in the Navy, bird colonel was a long way from a first lieutenant. But in the Navy, they call them captains. And of course, in the Army, captains is one rank above us. See, so we walk in. Hi, Captain. Hi. Hi. We knocking our ashes on his desk, see, and sauntered in, and he is furious. See, the Navy has us all respect. See, and the uniforms are all like have been washed and ironed, and here we are sounding in this raunchy. See, and what do you mean by flying into my airfield like that, landing like that? I said, we got permission. We said, requested an Army landing. It's clear to make an Army landing. That's how we make landings, Captain. And, and I still see him. He knuckles, red face. He's screaming at us. See? And of course here we are. Who's this idiot? And so we got out of there. He, what's your name? I gave him my name and where are you located? 75 scripts of Zamboanga. Okay. So by the time I got back there, the commanding officer said, "Hey, Gordon, what happened in Samar?" I said, "Well, we requested an Army landing, and guess they didn't like it." Oh. So it was a very different outfit, and we ate the same food as the enlisted man, see, and with same mess hall, same cook. We had a separate table for officers, but in the Navy, it has separate buildings, see. In fact, there's one guy, I was talking to him, and he was a carpenter. I said, "Gee, I bet it's fun to build these buildings." He said, "All I've been ever since I got in this goddamn Navy is build officers' clubs." I hate him. He was pissed off. But anyway, so I'm driving along in this Jeep, and this guy said, "Hey, Boot!" And I look over, and God, here's this kid I went to high school with. He's a gob, see, and somebody. And I said, "Ruby, come on, you can eat with me." He said, "I can't eat with you. I'll eat with you. You'll be sorry." I was. In the officers' club, they have white tablecloths. and black men, all in uniform, white uniforms. See, and they're all waiting on the tables. We had silverware and plates and glasses. See, and the damn enlisted men were just a pot, a mess hall, out of a big old GI can. Oh, it was awful. So the difference between what the enlisted men and the Navy got, and their officers, anyway. So I like the Army. I'm glad I didn't join the Navy. I didn't like that. I like the Army. Yeah.
What were the living conditions like in the Pacific for you as a pilot? What were the living conditions like in the Pacific?
It was okay. We had the enlisted men would make these platforms out of wood, so we're above the ground. And then they put this pyramidal tent. They put two tents, one on top of the other, so there was about it was a little bit cooler. And then we'd roll up the sides, and then Army cots. And because we were pilots, they gave us air mattresses. So we put the air mattresses on top of the Army cot, and mosquito netting, like a little box right around our cots. So it was really comfortable, and almost like being outdoors. See, but if it rained, you had to let because the rain went straight across. Oh boy, the tropical rains are really something. And so we'd have to put the sides down. Otherwise, it was really comfortable living. And then we had an officers' club, it was just another tent. See, we'd go over, and they had a piano there. My friend Joe Crooks would play the piano, and then I'd teach all these people these naughty drinking songs I learned in high school. So we'd sing these songs, and we had, of course, some songs, Army songs. So anyway, we played volleyball. We didn't have anything to do, no guard duty or nothing. See, all we did was fly and play volleyball, a little baseball, softball, and we could grab a jeep anytime we wanted to and go in town. And so it was. Once you landed, it was okay. And of course, the neat thing was that if you ever got hurt, you never came home. See, you never made it. So if you did come home, you're perfectly, not injured at all. So in that way, when we didn't lose many, we lost a couple guys to weather. And the weather would go on clear in the morning, and you come back and the clouds would go to 35,000 feet, and you couldn't fly in those things because of the violent, weather. So we'd have to go around those airplanes, around those thunderbolts, and to get to land. But it was this constant worrying about the next mission, about combat.
Yeah, how did it affect you being in combat for so many hours and then being able to return to normal life for a bit?
Well, no, you're able to forget it. I didn't lose any sleep at night. One thing in the Army, you learn to sleep no matter where you are, whenever you want it, and sleep anywhere. And even to this day, I can lie right down right and go sleep. No problem. So it was, but again, after a while, you started getting, I remember during the Korean War, I flew with a guy, and he flew P-51s in Europe, and he said the first 50 missions was really scary in flying P-51s. Then he said he became a flight leader and flew 50X more missions, and then he volunteered for 50 more missions to be the operations officer. And he said, by this time I'm liking it. It's really exciting, see? And he said, in other words, I'm getting a little bit crazy, see? Again, we call it clanky or combat, Anyway, so he, then after his 50 missions, he volunteered for 50 more, and the commanding officer and the flight surgeon personally ushered him down, put him on this airplane for the States, because he wanted to stay over there and fight. See, crazy. See, you get
Did you have any lucky charms that you took with you on your flights, or any routines that you would do before getting into the plane?
Any routines or lucky charms? Or
No, I didn't have anything. I think most of us, some of us had a girlfriend's name painted on the cover of the nose of their airplane, and my flight leader had that, and I met her later after years, and here, of course, she is nude, sitting in the front of this airplane. I said, "Oh, so you're Maisie or whatever her name was? Sure, I remember your picture on what's his name's airplane." And she smiled and laughed. She said, "That was really funny," and I remember the picture. I think it maybe, no, maybe that.
This one?
No, this one here. No, that shows a wing. It doesn't show
For
the
the
picture.
P-40.
It's a P-48.
48.
It's P-38 down below.
oh, there we go.
Well, one thing you probably might be interested in is that as you fly, you become more spiritual. You become seem closer to the Creator. In fact, in this poem right here, just give me this whole thing. In this poem that I'm going to read to you, it's called High Flight. It was written by a guy by the name of McGee. He was an American who fought for the RAF in England. He was killed going up through a cloud, and he hit another airplane that was going down through, and he died. But before he died, he wrote this poem. And by the way, if you go to Air Academy, you have to memorize this poem and be able to anytime. It goes high. Oh, I've slipped the surly bounds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air, up the long, glorious, burning blue. I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. See, so this is what I think and I remember flying in Minneapolis. I had to fly night at these night flights, and every time I landed after I was different. I felt like I'd been there close to God, see. So, and see, when I came back from Borneo, and I'm flying this guy's wing, and we're going straight down, and we hit compressibility. And when you hit compressibility of the speed of sound in an airplane, you have no control. So I'm going 660 miles an hour straight down, and I remember 20,000 feet, realizing I'm at 20, which is about 4 miles high. See, so 4 miles high, and I'm going 10 miles a minute. See, so it's 10 times 4 times 20, 60, it's 24 seconds. I'm going to go hit the ocean. See, so I reached up to pull the canopy, and then I was going to loosen my seatbelt, sit up, and then I'd be sucked out of the cockpit. But I would have hit the horizontal stabilizer on the P-38. See, at that speed, I wouldn't have cleared it. and I would have been dead in 30 seconds. So a little voice said, a voice, I didn't hear a voice, but it's a voice, but you don't hear any voice. In other words, you know. Anyway, this little voice says, trim it. And I said, trim it? You're God or my guardian angel trying to save my life. And I argue with it. See, can you imagine anybody so dumb? But in the airplane, you have these two wheels, one for the nose and one for the rudders, see? And so, and of course, you didn't use the one in the P-38 unless you had lost an engine, because the counter-rotating prop took that one away. Anyway, so, but I rolled the back, and I could feel the airplane, notice the airplane coming out of this dive, see? And so I knew, and I believed it. See, I said, okay, I'll stay. And I stayed in the airplane, and we just came right on the deck of the Sulu Sea doing 660, just maybe 100 feet above the ground, above the water. But because you get lower, of course, by this time I pulled my throttles back, and the airplane did have a dive flap, which they didn't have earlier. So this airplane had a dive flap, and then as you get lower, the air is more dense. See, so I was able to come out just so. And during the war, my life was saved 4 times by this little voice, and I wouldn't be here, no question about it. And then during the Korean War, twice, I was flying P-51. I was flying P-51 Mustangs, and my life was saved twice by this little voice. And then twice since then, once in a little cabin near Sun Valley, near Snowmass, Colorado, and then another time out here in a kayak in the Blue River right here, saved my life. So 8 times this voice has saved my life. And I don't know, I've never heard of many people having had that happen to them. So maybe there's a reason for my living this long.
Yes.
Maybe I'm supposed to, see, what I want to do is build a ski area. And it's a beginning ski area. It's for beginners. And then I want to have this little ski area run by a charter school. And so the kids would be flipping hamburgers in 1 week, and next week they're selling T-shirts, and the next week they're the ski instructors, so they all rotate the jobs. Anyway, and then I want to build a little chapel, because I think that we have to be closer to our Creator, and I think we have to be. That's where we're going to be becoming closer and closer. And as consciousness rises, we become more loving. And I want to start an art school. And the definition of beauty is godliness. See? And so that your thoughts are godly. And you use words that are godly. And you create works that are godly, that lift mankind and not divide them and have them fighting and shooting each other and killing each other. That's nonsense. What we want to do is to become more godlike. And that's why I want to build a little chapel. And the chapel would be very much like based on Gaudi's chapel. Gaudi was a guy who lived about 100 years ago, and he started this cathedral in Barcelona, Spain, which is very beautiful. People from all the world, millions go there every year to see this cathedral. And I want to build this little small model. We can do it in 30 days. What you do is you build a rebar and wire mesh as an armature, and then you foam it, see, and then you carve the foam, and then you hit it with fixative on it. And you can do that in 30 days. It would just be beautiful. And so it of course be small and not huge like the cathedral. Right. But I want to have a world contest. So anybody who wants to go and study in the drawings, or go to Barcelona and see and want to design a chapel for us. I'm hoping to build it right here in Summit County, and it could be really fun to do.
Yeah,
So
we'll be sure to.
Anybody who's listening to this want to draw just black and white on a white piece of paper. I don't want anything fancy. I don't want any cover. Just put it in an envelope and send it to me, and with your name and you could send it to my post office box, which is box 1929, Silverthorne, Colorado, 80498, and you could send that drawing to me, and we'll see if you'll win the contest. Good, you'll be famous.
No, let the people know, the
Yeah.
people that watch this.
Yeah,
For sure.
So I'm hoping to build it in very close to Silverthorne.
Right. Oh, I'll definitely put the word out for this.
Yeah, great.
I'd like to ask you just a couple final questions.
Yes.
First of all, could you tell me about the end of the war and where you were?
Yes, I remember that well. We were at the officers club, and the flight surgeon always gave us a little shot of alcohol after each mission, just one little couple ounces. Well, he had all these bottles of booze, so he donated that to the party, and we mixed it with 50-50 with pineapple juice, and then we used the Filipino whiskey as booze, and we used this as a wash. It didn't take us long to be at loop, see, and so I'm not feeling any pain, and we're all shot our 45s into the air, and so we're celebrating, and the little voice says, "Go to your tent." Go to the tent? But why? The war is over. We're gonna have this. Go to your tent. Well, of course, because it'll save my life 4 times, I left, and I'm walking towards my little tent. God, I look in the ditch and hear this little ditch filled with water. That's that's big. Takes the water. Anyway, and there, lying there, was my commanding officer. Geez, I jumped in and I pull him out and I revive him, and I said, "Now you just mustn't fall in the ditch. Now you must go home." So I set him and he walk on and turn right around and fall down in the ditch again. See, I saved his life 4 times. Otherwise, he would have drowned. See. And finally, I took him and put him in his own bed, took his shoes off, and he went to sleep there. And the next morning, he remembered. He remembered my saving his life, so he gave me a pretty good write-up in my 201 file. Anyway, so I definitely remember the end of the war.
I'd like to ask you as well, what do you want younger generations to remember about the air war in the Pacific?
Anything I remember?
No, what do you want younger generations to know and remember about the air war in the Pacific?
Well, I just want them to know that you have these very extremely brave guys and very capable, and we could donate their lives to protect our country and protect our, the people that came up to follow us, the generation alive today. And I think that's what I want them to remember, is that there were people that cared about our country and about being close to and having a high consciousness and being thoughtful and being loving you don't have to go to a war to do that. You can just sit quietly and realize, and as McGee said, you can reach out and touch the face of God no matter where you are. You don't even have to go up in the clouds in the mountain and fly an airplane. You can just sit underneath a tree in your backyard, and that's what I would like to see, and that's my hope. That's my dream. Is that people will wake up and realize the beauty of the world, beauty of God, and beauty of other human beings.
Do you have any thoughts as to what the meaning of life is?
Well, I think that's what we're doing here. That's our mission, is to become one with the Creator. We were once there, apparently, and now, but then they had the fall of of mankind, and now we have to get together to become one with the Creator. I think that's the reason why we're here, and not to collect money or not to be important, but to realize, what life is, how beautiful it can be.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gordon. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And thank you for having taken the time to interview with me and for your service.
Yeah, anytime you want any questions.